Hello, everyone. Today, we're going to talk about an incredibly powerful philosophy that can transform your life from the ground up without requiring you to take massive, exhausting steps to do so. At some point in our lives, we've all set big goals, like getting healthier, reading more books, learning a new language, or maximizing our productivity. However, more often than not, these goals end with us returning to our old, mundane routines after just a few weeks of enthusiasm. But why? Why is it so hard to break free from our bad habits and integrate good ones into our lives? Sometimes in life, we put things off. Procrastination has practically become a disease of our time. Then you say, okay, this time I'll do it. And yes, you do start putting your plans into action. Everything goes well in the first few days. Your motivation is high. You feel different. You tell yourself, this time, I'm really going to succeed. But then something happens. One day, you skip the gym. One day, you can't get up early. One day, you derail your plan, and that small slip-up eventually leads you back to your old habits. So why? Today, we'll find the answers to these questions, and much more, by examining how something small can become the most important building block of a massive system. We'll see how even tiny improvements, those that seem so insignificant they might go unnoticed at first glance, can compound over time to reach proportions we could never have imagined. The philosophy you'll hear throughout this video will show you, step by step, how to stay on your feet even when your routine is turned upside down, and how to reshape your environment to your advantage when your motivation hits rock bottom. If you're ready, let's begin to discover the immense power of the word atomic. James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, which has reached millions of people worldwide, explores precisely these questions. This book explains that major changes don't actually stem from big decisions, but from small behaviors repeated every day. So, can small habits really change our lives? Most people want to change something in their lives. This is because, generally speaking, they're not satisfied with their current situation, state of mind, or behavior. But when it comes to actually making a change, they take steps to distract and justify themselves, thinking, oh, never mind, next time, or it's not the right time. Somehow, they know how to sabotage themselves because, in this regard, people are quite experienced. I need to be more disciplined. I should live a healthier life. I could be more successful. Or, I can fix this and that and do such and such. Yes, it sounds great in theory, and even very easy at that. But in practice, it starts with hope, yet often ends in the same cycle, falling back into old habits. Sometimes things start off well, even go very well, but after a while, old habits creep back in, and we always ask ourselves this question: why can't I change? James Clear puts it this way in his book: you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your habits. This gives us a very powerful clue. Habits. In the book, James Clear puts it exactly this way: your results are a delayed measure of your habits. Your net worth is a delayed measure of your financial habits. Your weight is a delayed measure of your eating habits. Your knowledge is a delayed measure of your learning habits. We generally shape our lives by setting goals and try to do things in line with those goals. Goals like, I'll lose this much weight in this amount of time, I'll earn this much money in this many months, or I'll buy that house, car, or the latest model phone I want, are small practices people use to motivate themselves. But there's a very fundamental point we overlook. A goal alone doesn't change anything, because a goal merely points the way. What truly matters is the system, your actions, your behaviors, your immediate reactions, and the mindset you've developed. We just quoted from the book saying, you sink to the level of your habits. In other words, your system, that is, the behavioral patterns you've formed up to this point. Those behavioral patterns make up your system. And here, the book Atomic Habits is actually saying this: it's not about what you want, it's about what you do every day. In other words, those small habits, that is, the system that makes you who you are. Forget the goals, focus on the systems. When people want to make changes in their lives, they usually start by setting goals: to get in better shape, to earn more money, to build a successful business, to become a calmer and more peaceful person, or to spend more time with loved ones. All of these sound reasonable, because for years, we've been taught that the path to success lies in setting the right goals. I believed this for a long time too. In school, I set goals for the grades I wanted to get. When I worked out, I set goals for the performance levels I wanted to reach. In my professional life, I planned the income figures I wanted to achieve. Sometimes I succeeded, but most of the time, I didn't reach the results I wanted. After a while, I noticed something interesting. The real reason for my successes or failures wasn't my goals. The real deciding factor was the systems I applied every day while trying to reach those goals. Because goals show us the point we want to reach. Systems, on the other hand, create the path that takes us to that point. Although the difference may seem small at first glance, it's actually significant enough to change the course of your life. For example, imagine you're the head coach of a soccer team. Your goal may be to win the championship at the end of the season. That is your objective. However, it is not the objective itself that will lead to the championship. It is how players are selected, how practices are planned, how communication within the team is managed, and how players are prepared physically and mentally. These are the elements of the system. The same applies in the business world. An entrepreneur's dream might be to build a company worth millions of liras. However, what determines this outcome is not the size of the dream. It's how well they know their customers, how they develop their products, how they build their team, and what decisions they make every day. In other words, it's all about systems. Let's consider a musician. They might want to take the stage and deliver a flawless performance, but it's not just this desire that makes them successful. It's the work they do every day, practicing the challenging parts over and over, evaluating the feedback they receive, and the routine they establish to improve themselves. In short, goals provide direction. But what changes our lives isn't goals, it's systems, because goals are about the future. Systems, on the other hand, are about what we do today. Every action you take is a vote for the person you want to become, says James Clear. In other words, with every move you make, you're choosing yourself. With every action you take, you're casting a vote for yourself. And at the end of the day, the person you choose takes the seat. They're in charge, they're at the helm, and yes, that person is you. You've chosen yourself with those votes, and the person you've chosen might not be the one you want to be. People ask, what should I do to start making a change? This is a trap of a question for that person, and the real question should be, who do I want to be? Because behavior follows identity. The only thing that reflects a person's character is their behavior. How they speak, how they react, how they act. Consider two people. One says, I'm trying to quit smoking. I've even gone to therapy to quit, tried different methods, and I'm going to quit by now. Nicotine gum will eventually wean me off cigarettes. The other says, I am someone who no longer smokes. They hit the reset button in their mind and are done with it. Although the goal of quitting smoking may seem the same on the surface, the mental approach is completely different. And here, just as we discussed a moment ago, that statement from the book comes to the fore. Every action you take is a vote for the person you want to become. This may seem simple, but it's one of the most powerful models for explaining human behavior. Because you don't determine who you want to be just by thinking about it. You choose who you are through what you do every day. If someone says, I want to be a healthy person, but then eats irregularly every day, doesn't exercise, and doesn't prioritize sleep, it's clear that simply saying, I want to be a healthy person isn't enough. By acting that way, they're actually constantly voting for a different identity. They're creating an even less healthy identity. So here's what we need to keep in mind. For every aspect of myself I want to change, do I need to gradually change those habits as well so that I can transition into my new identity? And finally, let's remember that we need to cast plenty of votes for our new selves. The one with the most votes wins. There's also a very important thing that's been imposed on us lately, and that's actually holding us captive. All or nothing. It's this absurd situation where it's either a complete, radical change or nothing at all. Remember, major changes only happen in movies. We'll change our old habits little by little, step by step, and with consistency. Consistency is our motto. Working out for a day or a week doesn't make you an athlete, but if it becomes a regular and consistent habit, if that habit becomes second nature, then you can say, I'm someone who works out. This isn't about something in the future. On the contrary, it's about the present moment. You won't become someone in the future. You'll already be that person every day, right now. Every small decision you put into practice will make you the person of that moment, and over time, these habits will be what define you. Most human behaviors operate automatically. James Clear summarizes it this way. All behavior stems from the desire to solve a problem. You gossip because you want to satisfy your curiosity. You eat something because eating makes you feel better. The real issue isn't the behavior itself, but the emotion it's trying to address. And this is crucial. This is the part we need to understand. What lies behind the trigger? How did we respond to that situation? In other words, which version of ourselves did we choose to be, and how did that chosen self react to the situation? The book also discusses another very important topic: the environment. The environment doesn't force you, yell at you, or give you orders, but it does guide you. There are rules that apply to you and those that don't, but you're expected to follow them all. Your environment has its habits, and you're expected to behave accordingly. If you don't act in accordance with your environment, it retains the power to judge you. It doesn't wait for you to make a decision. The environment has already decided for you. Your environment has its habits, and it expects you to act in accordance with those habits. If you don't, your environment views you differently. Because you're supposed to live the way it's been imposed on you, here's the critical point. You feel as though you're making a decision every time, but in reality, most of the time, you aren't making a decision. You're simply going in the direction your environment is pushing you. James Clear's idea is this: our behaviors aren't as conscious as we think they are. Most behaviors are triggered, facilitated, automated. In other words, the environment removes the behavior from being a choice and makes it the default. When people fail, they think, I have weak willpower. But most of the time, that's not the problem. The problem is that you're expecting the right behavior in the wrong environment, and that's nearly impossible. Here's the trick our mind plays on us. We have to make thousands of decisions every day, and our brain often operates in energy-saving mode. Therefore, the brain doesn't need to expend extra energy to exhibit the behaviors we're accustomed to. The thought process, if we tried to make every decision consciously, we'd burn out, runs in the background, and then this option automatically emerges. Choose the easiest path. And yes, as you might have guessed, the easiest path is often the one we've been taught, the one our environment has imposed on us, because the basic math here is set up to reach the result as quickly as possible. The brain wants this. Let's resolve this situation as quickly as possible. But the book reminds us of this: bad habits aren't broken. They're simply replaced with new ones. In other words, during that phase of achieving quick results, the moment we change our own habits, the brain will still make quick decisions, but this time, it will exhibit that behavior based on the new information system it has absorbed. When we look at the common traits of people who appear successful in our surroundings, in the media, or in the public eye, we actually see the same thing in all of them: repeated small, fundamental behaviors, and those small fundamental behaviors have formed large systems. This is a process. It has become a reality for those people. Those small, fundamental behaviors they've built have become their identity. They've constructed their own personality systems in this way. Ancient Greek philosophers debated a dilemma known as the summaries paradox. Does a single coin make a person rich? You'd say no. But when you add one more, and one more, and one more to that coin, you reach a critical threshold where you have to admit that the person is now rich. Atomic Habits is exactly that single coin. Meditating for 1 minute a day or reading one page of a book may seem like it doesn't change anything that day, but each small habit is a grain of sand you place on the right side of the scale. As long as you don't stop, the entire weight of the system will begin to tip in your favor. Remember, success isn't a finish line to reach, but a system to be refined forever. Focus not on the size of your goal, but on the strength of your system. Take control of your life and strive to be just 1% better every day. Never stop learning, loving, and striving. James Clear sums it up this way: success is the product of daily habits, and this book tells us this: small habits produce big results. And let's conclude the video with the quote from the beginning: you don't rise to the level of your goals, you sink to the level of your habits. Let's reevaluate our habits in light of the version of ourselves we want to become, and remember that those small habits will shape our greater identity.